We are learning as a schus for Shlema Filan Chaya Vaserach and Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. By the two dots in the middle of the daf. We said in the Mishnah, Machroi Mishkana Rabbi Yomer Bitel V'Chamar Loy Bitel. If a guy can be mevatel his Avoda Zara to cancel its status as an Avoda Zara. But if he had an Avodah Zarah and he sold it or he used it as collateral on a loan, Rebbe says that's enough of an indication that he's lost interest in this Avodah Zarah, and that's a default batala cancellation. The Chachamim disagree. Sagt Gemara, Ziri Amar Rav Yochanan Rav Yirmiyah Abba Amar Rav Chad Amar Machlekes B'Tzoyref Oivik Chavim. One says this is only talking about a tzarif. Tzarif is just, Rashi says, is just an example. A tzarif is a guy who works with metal. So he says it's just the normal cases you would sell it is to someone, a metal dealer. So he says the machlekes is only when it went to a guy. If he sold it to a guy. Al b'tzarif Yisrael, if the guy sold it or was mashkin it to a Yisrael, everyone agree. When a guy sells his avodah zarah to a yid, he knows the yid is not going to use it as an avodah zarah, so he's obviously canceling. He's obviously deciding that he's not interested in using it as an avodah zarah anymore. He doesn't care about it. So everyone will agree on that. The machlekes was not in the case of selling it to Yisrael. And the other ones, the machlekes is by a tzarif Yisrael, but notably, it doesn't follow through and say, but by its tzarif oived kechavim, everyone agrees it's not. So the Gemara then asks, Ibailu, tzarif Yisrael machlekes al tzarif oived kechavim divrei hakol loy bita. Do we say, as would symmetrically see, you would expect to say, that the machlekes is only in a tzarif Yisrael, but a tzarif oived kechavim, everyone would say it's not batal, right? Because there's more reason to say it's batal when it's sold to a yid. So maybe the machlekes is on both of them in this shita. So we're arguing, right? We had two shitas. One says the machlekes is by a tzarif oived kechavim, but tzarif Yisrael, everyone agrees it's batal. The other one says there's a machlekes. They're arguing in our Mishnah about a tzarif Yisrael, but it doesn't say what the din is by oived kechavim. So now we're going to say. We're going to try to bring a raya whether the machlekes is just legabi Yisrael, or if the machlekes, if you have the same machlekes by where it was sold to a guy. Tashmad Amar Rebbe Niron Dvorai Keshemachar Lechavla Dvorei Chavayre Keshemachar Le'Oivda. Rebbe says it seems that the psak, that the halacha seems to be like me when it was sold for destruction. And like those who are chaylik on me, right? Our Mishnah was a machlekes Rebbe and the Chachamim, and the Chaverim, the Chachamim are more likely right when it was sold for to be worshipped. My lechavlo, my laavda, ilay melechavlo lechavlo mamish, laavda laavda mamish. If you say lechavlo, he sold it, and he said, he sold it to a junkyard, and he says, I want it to be destroyed. So then that's a bittul. He's saying very clearly he wants it to be destroyed. And if you say la'ovda, means that he sold it to he gave it to a temple that it should be worshipped. There would be no room for any argument about it. Clearly, if he sells it to a church or to a temple that should continue to be worshipped, he's not being mavatal. It must be that this Oivda and Chavla it doesn't mean that he's selling it to be worshipped, but it means he's selling to where it will often be worshipped. So he sold it to a guy. And when it says to destruction, it means he sold to a yid, which most likely it's going to be destroyed. Ushmamina, bein bezeh machlekes. And he said, Rebbe said that Niron Dvarai Keshemarcha Lechavra. So Vaisa says that he said his din, even when it was sold to Rebbe, who said that it's batal. He said it's batal even when it was sold live there, meaning to a guy. And he said Rebbe said his din as well, when it was sold to a Yid. And the Chacham disagreed on both of them. So I think I am more correct when it was sold to a Yid. That I think what I said that it's batal is true. Umanu tzaref Yisrael. But and the other part is because my chaverim only argued with me legabi when it was sold to a guy. What he's trying to say is exactly the opposite of what it's not a raya that they're chaylik on both, but rather he's saying that when it's sold to a yid, even the chachamim amayda, even the rabbanon amayda to him that it's going to be bought. Meisvei. Frag the Gemara. Halakech grutois. So we're saying now, according to the Shita, that everyone will agree that when it's sold to a yid, it's going to be bought. Halakech grutois menoiv de. If a yid buys pieces of silver from an oived kechavim, umatzah ben avodas kechavim, and he bought it from goyim, and he finds amongst it little small idols. If prior to him giving the money, he was Mashach. Now, Mashicha, as we know, is a full kinyan. It's regardless of whether money was given. But we say if the Yid was Mashach this silver and together with it the idol, he should return it to the guy. He never was a Mekach Tais. He wanted to buy silver. He didn't want to buy Avodah Zara. But if he had already given the money, at that point, it has the appearance that it was bought and now he's selling it back. So because he's going to have to give back the money as well as give back the pieces of silver. In that case, he can't be machzer it, so he has to destroy it. So if you say the Chama saying it's not bottled even when the Avodah Zarah is sold to Yisrael, so then we have a problem here. This was sold from a guy to a Yid. Our Mishnah said when something is sold, it's according to Rebbe, it's bottled. So we could say it's talking about, and here we're talking about a Yid who's buying from a guy. So if you say that the Chachamim are being chaylik even when it's sold to a Yid, so then we could say the Chachamim are the ones who can say that it's not bottled over here. If you say that the machlekes is only by Ovid Kechavim, but sorry, sold to a kol bitel amani, who's going to be the man the Amar who says that you have to destroy it? You have to destroy this idol that was found amongst the possessions, even if you say, even though the Chacham Masakin that he can't return it, but let him just destroy it or melt down the idol or do whatever he wants with it because it was already bottled by the guy selling it. Zakdamara, no, it's not a raya. So it seems to be a raya that the Rabbanim must be chaylik even when it's sold to Yisrael. Zakdamara, no. Shani Hasam, that would not be a bittul, even if you say that the Chachamim hold that that everyone agrees when it's sold to Yisrael that it's going to be bottled. But over there, it wasn't sold on the guy himself didn't know he was selling it. It was mixed up amongst his silver, so he didn't have in mind that he's selling his avodah zarah. And the whole bittul happens because the guy doesn't want it anymore. He doesn't want it to be an avodah zarah. In this case, that wasn't the case. He just happened. It was he made a mistake and sold it amongst other things, and that's the reason why it wouldn't be bottled over there. And that's why it requires destruction. Ton Rabba. Lava Allah, if a guy had an avodah zarah and he borrowed money and he used avodah zarah as a mashkin, oy shenafla, oy shenafla Allah mapilis, or something fell on it, a building collapsed on it, and the guy didn't try to get it, his idol out. Oisha Gamvua listed, or it was stolen by robbers. Oisha Nichua Bailam Vahochlim Nisayam. Or the guy moved to India and he left behind his Avoda Zara. Im Asidin Lachser, Kamilchemes Yeshua, Eina Betela. If they're going to come back like the Milchama of Yeshua, meaning the Gemara is going to say this is a reference to the Amorim who went to be do Milchama against Yeshua. If they're going to come back the way those who went to do Milchama with Yeshua did, then it's not batal. So the Rishonim asked the obvious question. Our Mishnah just said we have a machlokes between Rabbi and the Rabbanan. This seems to be saying like the Rabbanan that if you loiva, it's eina betel. It's passing like against Rabbi that when you make the avodah zara a mashkin, it's not bottle. So you say it's talking about a case that it depends on what kind of mashkin it is. Some mashkinis are given with the idea that if you pay back the loan, then you're going to get back the mashkin, and sometimes it's you give a mashkin, you say that's the almost like a down payment on the loan, and you're going to keep it in either case. So this is that kind of case was really a sale, a permanent sale. So why do we need so many examples to tell you that if someone gives something away or he's not interested in it, that it's bottle? I'm sorry, it's right. We said all these are if he doesn't intend to return, or if he does intend to return, it's not bottle. If you would just say lava, but you wouldn't say any other case, I would say the reason why it's not bottle is because he could have just sold it outright, but instead he structured it as a mashkin that the person can keep if it's not paid back. I would say if a house fell down on top of it and he doesn't dig it up, maybe that is bottle because he had the option there to go dig it up and he didn't do so. Maybe just the fact that a house fell down on it and it's buried under it doesn't mean he's mevatel it. He just hasn't gotten around yet to going to collect it, but maybe later on he'll collect it, and that's the reason it's not bottle. Avo gomvu listim but were stolen by robbers, and he didn't go after the robbers, and he doesn't have the option that he could just take it whenever he wants. Maybe there it's bottle. Tzricha. Vitana gamva listim mishum desavar yavid kechavim shakala niftafalcha Yisrael shakle adi dam yikar mazvan lo yavid kechavim. He thinks when it's stolen, even though he doesn't expect to get it back, but he's still in his mind it's still being used as an avodah zarah. It still has some utility. The whole thing is not a monetary value to him, but he says if a guy gets it, he'll worship it, and if a yid gets it, he'll sell it to a guy. So in his mind, it's still an avodah zarah. But where he moved away and he left it behind, from the fact that he didn't take it with him, betulim batla. So tzricha it tells you that even that is considered a bit. Now the Gemara goes back to that strange lashon that we said. If they're planning to return, if it's like the Amorim who are loichem who did battle with Yeshua when Yeshua conquered Eretz Yisrael, then it's not bottle. Midim Yeshua mihader hader. The Gemara asked those who fought against Yeshua were all killed, so they didn't return. So what kind of example is it? So the Gemara comment and masidim lachzer hareyu k'melchames Yeshua. If they're planning to come back, then it's like k'melchames Yeshua ve'ela b'teil, and it's not going to be bottle. What does it mean? That it's I'm sorry. If when the guy goes away and he's expecting to come back, get it back. It's going to be usher, just like those of these Amorim who went out to be loichem against Yeshua. They expected, they didn't expect to lose. They thought they were going to win, so they weren't mevatel avodah zarah. So it's saying that there's going to be the same thing if they planned to come back. That then it's like these idols that were left behind by those who were fighting against Yeshua. What is so? Then it's not really saying anything. You're just saying these people expected. Why are you involving the Milchama of Yeshua? So Gemara Milsa Agav Orcha Kamashlan. We wanted to tell Yeshua because there's a different din that's said about the Milchama of Yeshua. Ki Adam Rav Yud Amar Rab. Yisrael shezakav levein l'shtachav. If a yid set up a brick on its side in order to bow down to it, but he hadn't done so yet. But then a guy jumped ahead, and when you set up an avodah zarah, it doesn't become aser. A yid does it; it doesn't become aser until he bows down, until he actually worships it. But he didn't do so. But Avodah Kechavim went and bowed down to his brick. Aser, it's aser. Even though generally the rule is someone cannot aser someone else's thing by being oived it, right? We can't have goyim if a yid owns the Empire State Building, you can't have a guy saying, "I'm going to worship the Empire State Building," and now the yid has to burn it down. Minolan, but if he sets it up as avodah zarah, then the guy's action can make it asa. Minolan da asra. Where do we see it's asa? Rav Elazar ketchila shel Eretz Yisrael. So it also comes. It's from this din of Yeshua, from the conquest of Yeshua of Eretz Yisrael. The Amar Achmana, Bashreim Tisha from Beis. The Torah says that they're, their asheras, their avodah zarah trees will be burnt. Michti. Yerusha hilahem me'avesem. This is the Eretz Yisrael was a Yerusha that belonged to the Yidden. So how could that which the avodah zarah that the Yidden found in Eretz Yisrael when they conquered it, how could they be real avodah zarah? Like we said, a guy can't worship something that belongs to a Yid and make it avodah zarah, and the Eretz Yisrael belonged to the Yid. So how could the Goyim bow down to a tree that's mechubar l'karka of Eretz Yisrael, and it doesn't belong to them? It really belongs to the Yidden, right? That's what Rashi says in Bereshis. That the reason why we start from Bereshis is that in order to inform the non-Jews that Eretz Yisrael was always ours. That was Rabban Hashem's plan. And if you'll say that maybe these are trees that existed from before the Rabban Hashem gave Eretz Yisrael to Avraham Avinu, right? There was 2,000 years before that. So he says, so why do we say that Ashrayim Tisra from Beish? Why don't we line up all the Amorim, all the Knanim, and tell them either be Mavatalit or we're going to shoot you. You could, like we said before, we had this earlier in the Gemara, you can force a non-Jew to be Mavatal and Avodah Zarah. So why don't we do that? Why don't we force them to be Mavatal? Ella midapalcha Yisrael Egam. So the reason must be because the Yidden were Oived Avodah Zarah by the Egel. So when they did that, Gala at the time, the Nichlu B'Avodah Gechavim. That they were showing that they wanted Eretz Yisrael also to be Avodah Zarah. Also, that's going to be the svara behind why if a Yid sets up a brick and then a Oived Gechavim is Oived it, even though it belongs to the Yid, is because that's the shlichus of the Yisrael. So that's the same thing. So that's what happened in Eretz Yisrael. The Yidden, when they were over the Egel, they made the Goyim in Eretz Yisrael their shluchim to be Oived their possession, the Eretz Yisrael, which is their possession. Hachanami Yisrael Shazakav Levena, God that the Nichalei Bavos Gechavim. V'chiyasa Oived Gechavim Palach Lashachusa Didei Kavit. So it's all the same thing. In fact, Gemara, the Dilma Be'egel Hu Denichel, V'midi Achrina Loi. Why are we saying that when the Yidden bow down to the Egel, they were also maskim. They made basically the Goyim shluchim to be Oived in Eretz Yisrael. Maybe all they were interested in was the Egel, not other Oived Yisrael. Amakra Eila Alehecha Yisrael. It says the Lashon Rabim. These are your gods. Meaning that they jumped on all the Avodah Zarah. It's affecting Gemara. Called Bahadi Egel Nitzru Mikam ve'elach Nishturi. The Gemara asks, maybe it's only those that were there at the time of the Egel, the trees that were there at the time of the Egel should be also, but the other trees, the Asheris that came later, those belong to the Yidden, and that they were not masking to Avodah Zarah, so those should be mutter. We're not going to know which is which, and therefore we have to burn down all the Asheris, Ashreim, Tishra from base. Sagt the Mishnah, Avodah Chacham shenichu avdeh b'shas shalom, an Avodah Zarah that that was left behind, he abandoned his Avodah Zarah. A guy abandoned it. B'shas shalom mutaris. If it's a time of peace, that it was nothing forcing him to abandon it, then the Avodah Zarah is mutar. B'shas milchama asura. But if it's a time of upheaval, so you could say he just ran away because he was afraid for his life, but he wasn't mavatal the Avodah Zarah. B'musayis shamalachim. These are, Rashi explains, these pedestals that were on the side of the road, that when the king would pass by, they would place idols on it for the king to bow down to. Those are mutter. As the Gemara will explain, because the Avodah Zarah are only put when the Malachim combine, they sometimes come and they sometimes don't. So it's not a real kvias of this pedestal for Avodah Zarah. It's just occasionally it will be used for that. Based nimmer harei kavodas kechavim. The tower that was built in Bavel to reach up to Shemayim, that was built by Nimrod, it has a din of avodas kechavim. Sheinu chua avdeh b'shas shalom. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a din of avodas kechavim. It's like a din of avodas kechavim. Sheinu chua avdeh b'shas shalom umutter. Since all the Goyim, when the Rebbeinu changed the languages, they got all confused and they left it. So Vaistais, they were mavatal it from its status as an Ovid Kechav. As an Avodah Zarah. Avagav dechi badrinu Rachmana Kashas Muhammadam, even though when the Rebbeinu confused them, it was an upheaval like a Muhammad. Since if they would have really cared about it, they would have come back. They had the opportunity to come back to it, and they did not do so. So that shows that their leaving was a bittul, and therefore it doesn't have a status of Avodah Zarah. But we said these pedestals that they put the Avodah Zarah of the Malachim on it are mutar. That doesn't make sense because they put the Avodah Zarah on it when the Malachim go by. That makes it mutar. He says because they put it there when the Malachim go by, and sometimes the kings don't go that way, and sometimes they don't. So the pedestals that might sometime be used if the king happens to pass by, that's not enough to give it a din of Avodah Zarah. When Ula came, he sat on a pedestal that was missing. A pedestal, Rashi says, this is not the pedestal that we refer to in the Mishnah. This is a pedestal that was actually used as a tashmisha Avodah Zarah. They used it to hold up an Avodah Zarah, and it got pogum. It was missing a piece from it, and he sat on it. He says that's enough to be mavat. They say that a bimus that has a piece taken out of it is aser. We had the machlokes Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan earlier, whether when a Avodah Zarah breaks, whether that makes it lose the shvarim of the Avodah Zarah, still have the status of Avodah Zarah or not? Do we say that the fact that it broke, that causes them to lose any faith in it or not? So he says, even according to Manda Amar, that they not over to the shvarim, the zila beimos. That's only the actual Avodah Zarah itself, that once it breaks, it's bizayin to bow down to a broken Avodah Zarah. It obviously has no power. To bow down to the broken piece. But this is just a pedestal. If it's a little bit broken, it doesn't lose its status as its tashmish for Avodah Zarah. It's not as crucial to it, but similarly, it doesn't lose its status as easily. Amalei man yavla me'afar the Rav Shmuel malin and He says, "Who will fill our eyes with the Gavaldic ashes of Rav and Shmuel?" Meaning, he said that we have the greatest respect for Rav and Shmuel. They say that a bimasher nifkam is mutter, not like Rav and Shmuel. Even according to the mandam that says that we are that the goyim do are oived l'shvarim, and they're also hanmi loived l'skechab to keep in the pelcha zila bei milsa lebitula. He says exactly the opposite svara. He says that the oived kechavim itself, to go stop being oived, it is a terrible bizayin. So it takes a lot to be mevatel avodah zarah. But over here, there's not as much invested in it. It's just a pedestal, even though it's also also tashmisha avodah zarah. But David Kechavim is more easily mevatel it. He doesn't care about it as much. Tani Kavasa Rabbi Yechon Reish Lakish. I mean, you're right, like Rabbi Yechon Reish Lakish, that say that a pedestal is batel. Bima shenifkam mutter. A bima that became pagum is mutter. So right off the top, you see a right. Mizbeach shenifkam aser. The Bryce continues. However, a mizbeach that lost a mizbeach used for avodah zarah that lost a piece of it is aser. It remains aser. But it has the most of it be destroyed. Hechidam bimus, hechidam mizbeach. The Gemara asks, what's the chiluk between a bimus and a mizbeach? Both of these things are something that was used where they were oived avodah zarah on top of it. So how do you distinguish between them? Because we're saying a mizbeach, it takes more to destroy it. The distinction is a bimus is a single stone and a mizbeach is made up of a lot of stones. Amar Chizkiya, Mikra. Chizkiya says we have a pasuk to support both of these propositions. First of all, that a mizbeach is made up of many stones, and secondly, that it needs to be mostly destroyed in order for it to be bought. It says this from a pasuk. B'shumoy kol avnei mizbeach ka'avnei gir minufetzes. When they destroy the stones of a mizbeach, like the ground up stones of gear, which is a chalk. When you grind up chalk, which obviously makes a dust. Lo yakumu asherim v'chamanim. At that point, when the Yidden do that, they won't have any more asherim, they won't have any more trees of avodah zarah and chamamim, and their different ways that they worship the sun. So the Gemara explains, if they are like if they're cut up or they're destroyed, that like these broken up stones, at that point, then the people, the Yidden, who had previously been over avodah on it, they will no longer do so because it's going to be bottled from being a mizbeach. V'loi yakumu, and if not, but if they don't break them, meaning if they don't destroy them fully, more than roiv yakumu, they still don't have a din of that they're bottled. Tana nevad shaloi aser a behemoth. Rashi says a nevad is babalik chayim hanesa likvaya. We're talking about using an animal. Again, we have said, if you remember way back when, we said that a bal chayim, a behemoth, does not become aser by bowing down to it. It doesn't become aser bahana. It's similar, like we said from Mashke Yisrael, that the cheshbon of where we come from but it does become aser likvaya. So we're talking about the din of a nevad. So when someone a guy worships his animal, so when he worships his own animal, aser becomes aser likvaya. But if he worships his friend's animal, it remains mutter to be brought as a cover. Ramini is a nevad. What is a nevad? Anything that's worshipped, whether it's by mistake or on purpose, whether by force or willingly. So, what is this case where a guy who worships an animal unwillingly. Lav going to honest behem the chaver v'shtachv'lei. Must l'chayr the case would be where one guy worships his friend's behema against the will of the owner. Amar Yochanan loy. No. We're talking about where Ovid Kechavim, where a guy put a gun to his head, and they forced him to be Ovid. It means the owner of the animal was forced to do it. That's what unsu. It's not a raya that someone can be Ovid, someone else, one person can be Ovid a different person's animal, and force him to make it into a avodah. Is that what we're talking about? Where the owner himself was forced to bow down to his own animal, and we're saying that it's still going to become us. Maskal or Zera, Einus Rachmana Patri. But we know that a Einus, the Torah says it's Patri, the Chsivil and Naira Lesasa Davar. The Torah says, Lagabi, someone who's Ma'anis and Isha, not if the woman is forced, she doesn't get punished. Now the obvious question is, we're talking over here about asering. We're not talking about aser. We're talking about whether someone gets punished. We're talking over here about whether the animal has a din of a nevad and it's also likvaya. What does that have to do with whether the person is mutter? So the achrayim say all kinds of pshatim, but basically the way I would distill it down to is we're talking about what we would say is that the iser likvaya comes from a form of the be'etzem, something that is, this is something that behema is not be'etzem capable of becoming nesar. It doesn't become aser when you bow down to it. But ligvaya, there's a special sensitivity, and they say that that sensitivity comes because the person was over on being. It comes from the chait. It doesn't come from the bowing down. It doesn't come from its status as an object of avodah zarah, but rather from the chait. That's what makes it something that has a chait done with it is not capable of being brought ligvaya. So he says if it's a inus, there's no chait, then there's no reason to be asked ligvaya. Ela amarava. Hakol hoya b'chlal loisa ovne. Everything is b'chlal that you're not allowed to be over it. But then the Torah says you should the mitzvahs you should live with them. That you shouldn't let yourself die. You shouldn't die doing the mitzvahs. You should have to pikuch nefesh is doicha the mitzvahs. You shouldn't die. Yatsa einus. That would tell you even in einus that you shouldn't you should say v'chai bohem and you shouldn't die for it. But then the Torah says a mitzvah that you shouldn't be mechal hashem dafilu ba'aynis, which is telling you that even ba'aynis you can't be ayved avodah zara. Haketz. That's so. What does it mean? The Torah is telling you on the one hand it says v'chai bohem v'lo sheyamas bohem. Which is meaning even by Einus, but then it says Yishloid Chalu, which means by Einus, by Avodah Zara, you can't let yourself get killed. It's telling you that Betsina, a person should be Avodah Zara by Einus rather than dying. But Befarhasi you shouldn't, because then there's the Chil Hashem. So that would be we see that you can't be Ovid Avodah Zara b'farhesya, even ba'inus. So you see that it is l'maisa Avodah Zara. You see it is a maisa. Even ba'inus, there is a chait involved in it. So that would be the reason why, even though we say Einus Rachmana Patre, it's still going to be asal igvaya when an animal is nevad ba'inus.
So what's the case meanwhile of Shal Chaver Motor?
Shall what?
We had we put this as a question, right? Because we said Shaloi Aser Shal Chaver Motor.
So no, we wanted it. We wanted to bring a raya. We were asking a kasha, right?
Right.
We said a ton of neved shaloi asav as a chavera is mutter.
Right.
We wanted to say we said that even a einus is aser, and we wanted to suggest that's talking about when you're worshiping your friend's animal. That's the case of einus. That would be a kasha. The Gemara is answering the kasha by saying no, that's not what einus means. Einus means an actual einus where he puts a gun to his head. So that interpretation of the brisa that was a kasha is no longer necessary. Okay, we'll stop over here because this is back and forth for a while.
All right. Thank you. Have a
Joyous,
great day.
Have a good day.
have a good day.